over through. It's a relative output. Okay. So here we have the relative output and relative demand. Together, demand and supply will determine the world price. And there we go. We have the relative supply of the foreign country and the relative supply of domestic country. And the relative supply of the world will lie somewhere in between. It's not exact. It doesn't have to be here. It can be somewhere in between. Okay. All right. Somewhere in between for the international relative price. Well, why is somewhere in between? Because this is where the trade can happen. For domestic producer, it will only sell to overseas. Right? The domestic producer, it will only sell to overseas if the price of the goods is more expensive in the international market, right? I will make more money from the world market. That's the only reason I will sell to the world. And for the foreign country, it will only import from the world only when it's cheaper than domestic price, right? So that's why the trade occurs, import-export occurs, only when the prices are different between domestic market and foreign market. And what determines the international price, it will be somewhere in between the domestic relative supply and international relative supply. Okay, here is how much trade will take place. The left-hand side is the home market, the right-hand side is the foreign market. And recall this red curve is the PPF, the production possibility frontier. Okay. Now, given the world price, this ISO value curve, this is where the home market will decide to produce at this point here. And given the budget allowance, right, given the price with their budget at this production, they can consume at point D. And this is how much they will export, because they make this much, but they only consume this much. And the differences is going to be for the international market. Exporting, and for foreign market, this is where they choose to produce, okay? And this is where they choose to consume. And what they produce is not enough to cover what they consume. What they're going to do is that they will import from home country. And therefore, the market clears. Given the price, we will have this much export of goods from home market and this much of import from home market to foreign market. Okay. Any questions? Now, we will discuss what is the effects of economic growth. We have been looking at the terms of trade, right? And then we want to link it to what happened if there's economic growth, and then we want to analyze what will be the outcome when one of the countries experiences economic growth, and what are the impacts to itself and the impact to the other country. And this is what we're going to look at. So the questions we are trying to answer here is this: is economic growth in China good for the standard of living for the advanced age, like European Union or US? Is the growth in a country more or less valuable when it's integrated to the world economy? And we are going to look at these questions in the following slides. We're trying to answer it. Okay, so what we have learned so far in our standard trade model will give us the precise answer to these two questions. Let's take a look at how it will be answered. Okay, using what we have learned. But before we talk about growth, we need to understand that growth is usually biased. It's not equal. Okay. What I mean by bias is this. So in the previous example, we have workers are working in a factory, and workers working on a field in the agricultural field, and their skill sets are different, right? Their skill sets are different. One needs to know about plants, need to know about crops, and the other one needs to know about machine, because when they manufacturing clothes using machine, they need to learn about machines. And what usually drives economic growth? Usually we have the force, the driving force for economic growth. It's well in the last couple of decades, it's pretty clear that the reason that drives economic growth is technological improvement. So when we have better technology, when we have better tools, then our productivity increase, right? So for example, in a factory, and if we have better machines, if we have better algorithm, computer software that can manage the production more efficiently, and then we will have our output, right? So why output is biased? Why? And suppose there is a breakthrough in the computer program, for example, and then so you have a better programming and organizing the machines for productions. So this will be benefit more for the manufacturing than the agriculture, right? So when there's one breakthrough in some area, it might benefit some industry more than the other industry. This is what I'm saying, right? This is what I'm saying. It will benefit some industry more than the other industry. So that will result in biased growth. Alright, it occurs in one sector more than the others, causing relative supply to change. And here, the example we have here is that the rapid growth has taken place in the US computer industries, but relatively little growth has occurred in US textile industry, clothes industry. You know? So computer industry has got the biggest improvement, biggest shots in the last few decades, but not in the textile industry for US case. All right. In the Ricardian model, technological progress in one sector causes bias growth. In the Hatchley model, where it's the resource-based model, endowment-based model, an increase in one factor of production cause bias growth in some sectors. So the two different places or two different sources that can drive the bias growth. Either technological improvement or there's a change in endowment, right? So Hatchley case, what can be the case? So imagine if you are a farmer, okay? Imagine you are a farmer, you're growing crops, and suddenly there's more raining days in a year. All right, there's more good weather, like beautiful days, good weather, nice temperatures, and that will boost the agricultural output for your banana more than the output for the clothes factory, right? Clothes factory normally depends on the weather or rain. Okay, so this is one of the explanations why there's something that can happen. So endowment, more rain endowment, sun, for example. Any questions? I will pull out my checkbox and see. I will monitoring regularly. If you have a question, you just can drop it there, and then I will take a look at it. Stop me anytime if you need my repeat on certain things. Don't feel shy about it. I can do that. Now, next, let's move on to the next. So here is how we show it graphically. So we have two sectors, right? One is food production, the other one is clothes production. Two different axes, y-axis and x-axis. So for example, if there's a growth towards, there's a bias growth towards clothes productions, and you see the gap between clothes, it's higher, it's more than the gap between the food production after the change in technology. Okay, the new PPF will shape differently than the original one. This is the original one, this is the new one. You see the shape is differently. There's a bias. There's bias growth towards one industry. And here is the opposite example, the opposite one. And now we have on the second diagram here is the bias growth towards food production. The gap on food is more than the gap in the clothes production. All right. And you see that after the change coming with a shock on the technology, we are using this diagram for example now. So imagine there's a big improvement on manufacturing clothes. And now, since you become better, more efficient, and cheaper making clothes, given the international price, right? Given the international price of clothes, the ISO value line, your best decisions will be made on this point. All right, this is where your decision is. This is where you decide how much clothes and how much food you want to produce at this point. Okay. And why do we care there's a change in the allocation of production, like the point here? Because when there's a change in the output, right, there's a change in the output, there will be change in the price. Why? Because the price is determined by supply and demand. When there's a change in the supply, there will be a change in the price. And why do we care about price? Because when there's change in price, there will be change in terms of trade. And then there will be change in the welfare. Okay? Try to digest that, try to understand that. And so now, how does the price changing taking place? And here is how. So remember, right, the relative price of something, relative price of process over food, it depends on the relative supply and demand. So now here is what we can show for the change in relative supply. And suppose there's a technological improvement here towards clothes manufacturing. People become better at manufacturing clothes and making it cheaper, easier, and faster. There will be more clothes supplied to the market relative to food production. And therefore, there will be a right shift of the RS curve, the relative supply curve, from RX1 to RX2. So imagine for every single price point, there will be more supply of clothes to the market if there's a bias growth towards clothes. On the other hand, for the other story, which is this story, if there's a bias growth towards food production, then there will be a left shift of the relative supply curve. Because When there are more supply of banana to the market, the relative supply of clothes will drop, right? More banana compared to clothes, then the relative supply of clothes will drop. Okay? Always remember, this is a relative supply. You are measuring the supply of clothes over the supply of food. When there's an increase in food, the relative supply of clothes to food will drop. Okay? Is it clear? Or if you want me to repeat this, just let me know. Alright. Okay, so buyer's growth and the resulting change in relative supply cause a change in terms of trade. Let me explain this. The buyer's growth in clothes industry will lower the clothes price relative to the food price and lower the terms of trade for clothes exporting. Okay? So, think about this. The more clothes supplied to the market, the price of clothes will be lower, right? More supply of clothes. Then there will be more clothes available in the market. The price, of course, will drop. It will be bad for clothes exporting. Okay? So if the country is mainly an exporter of clothes, then when the price of clothes drops, it will be bad for the country. Okay? It will be bad. It will lower the terms of trade for the country. Now, another story is if there's a buyer's growth in the food industry, what happens then? The banana will become cheaper, relatively speaking. Because when there's more banana, more food, right? The price of food will become cheaper relative to clothes. Even the price of clothes does not change, but still, relatively speaking, the price of clothes will become more expensive. Do you see that? Right? You have two things. You have a banana and clothes. If the price of banana drops, so the clothes will become relatively more expensive to you, even though the price is same. All right? Okay, it's easy, right? So this will increase the price of clothes relative to the price of food and improve the terms of trade for clothes exporters. Okay, so if the country exporting clothes mainly, and then if the country experience something, maybe more rain or better fertilizers or something, that makes the agricultural food cheaper, and that will improve the country's terms of trade because it relatively increase the price of clothes for the country. As being an exporter of clothes, this country will be benefited. Now, for the following story, following we are following the setup that the whole country is an exporter of clothes and import of food. All right. So keep that in mind all the time. Home country export clothes and import food. So we're gonna see our following analysis based on this setup. Okay. So what happened when there's a growth bias to clothes? And that will shift the RS curve to the right here. Okay, and that will you see it shift the RS curve for the world in panel A, while bias growth towards food will shape it to the left in panel B. And you see in panel A here, what happens is that if there's a bias growth towards growth, the relative supply will shift to the right, right? It will result in a new relative price to be lower. You see the price is lower here. 0.2 is lower than 0.1. So being a closed exporter, when the closed price in relative term is lower, it's bad for you. You are making less money because you're exporting close and you are making less money, receiving less money from the sales to the rest of the world. So it's actually bad for you. Okay. Now, we have seen when there's a growth, bias growth, right, towards productions. And we look at terms of trade, and then we look at how terms of trade is being impacted by the bias growth. And then we use the terms of trade to analyze the welfare impact for whole country. And now we are looking at something different, the export bias growth and import bias growth. And they are different than the production bias because for the productions, we are looking at the increase in productions of either goods, and then we look at the analysis following that. But now we are looking at the export-import side of the story. The country export and import, right? And what happened when there's an economic growth in the export sector? What I mean is that, for example, if China produce a smartphone and banana, and if China exports smartphones to the rest of the world, and what happened if there's a growth in the smartphone industry, and how does that will impact? How does that impact on Chinese terms of trade, and therefore the Chinese national welfare? So this is what we're going to look at. And the following story is we're going to look at if China import banana, right? If there's a growth in the banana sector, what happened to the terms of trade for China? Okay, given that bias growth. All right, so let's take a look at that. Export bias growth will reduce a country's terms of trade. Following our analysis in the previous example, it makes sense to you, right? If there is a expansion in the smartphone industry, and there will be more cell phones being available to the market, and China export mainly smartphones, then being more smartphone on the market is bad for the price of smartphones. When the price of smartphone drops, it will decrease the terms of trade for China. Okay, if China sells 1 million smartphones a year for $10 each, then you can calculate the revenue of China, how much they can make from selling smartphones. But if the price of smartphone drops, right, to 80%, then China will make only 80% of what they used to make before, right? So if they make less money, they will be able to finance themselves to buy banana, because banana, you cannot buy as many bananas as before, right? Because you're making less money. So if there's a export sector bias growth, that will reduce the country's terms of trade in the export sector, right? It will reduce the country's terms of trade. It will make the country less happy or less in terms of welfare. However, if there's import bias growth, then that will increase the country's terms of trade and increasing the country's welfare. So let's put that story again in our analysis to see how this works. Now, China exports smartphones and import bananas. If for some reason suddenly the climate change, there are tons of rains, okay, and the rains help to grow banana, for example. I'm not sure. I'm not sure banana needs a lot of water, but we assume that banana needs a lot of water, and somehow China gets a lot of rain, and then there is an expansion on the banana production. Okay, and then because China has a lot of banana now, so the banana price will decrease, and then Chinese citizens, I mean Chinese will pay less for banana, okay, and they will buy domestic banana because domestic banana become more and cheaper, and the demand from the world banana has less. So when demand become less, the price become less, right? So the price of world banana become cheaper, all right? So for whatever money you are making from selling clothes to the rest of the world, will allow you to buy more bananas for Chinese people. So your terms of trade improves. The country's welfare improves. Okay, the country's welfare improves. Make sense to you? Now we learn two things, right? If there's a expansion in the export segment, it's bad for the country because it will make whatever you are selling become cheaper, and you make less money for each item you are selling. And when there's expansion on the import segment, you will be happier because the goods that you are importing will become cheaper, and then your money will buy you more of this stuff. All right. Now we are trying to. So after we learn all this, we are trying to answer the questions here. Has the growth of the newly industrialized economies hurt the advanced nation? Why do we have this kind of questions? Because we often hear the voice from advanced nation that there are job loss to the newly developed, newly industrialized nations, and then more import from those countries, and then it will destroy the job opportunities at home, things like that, right? But when we are looking at the data, we don't really see that, and then we can actually provide a good explanations for why this is actually the growth in the newly industrialized countries are actually good for advanced countries like US and European Union and Japan, for example. So using what we have learned, we can see that we can have the picture in our mind that if the growth in the new industrialized economies are the area where the advanced nations exports, then it's gonna be bad for them. But if the newly industrial economies they have growth in the products that the advanced nation imports, that's gonna be good for them, right? So using some examples, let's do some examples of things. So imagine China produce everything you see in Walmart: tower, toothpaste, TV, microwave, cups, and everything, right? When you go to Walmart, you see everything on the shelf, and those are the things that China produced, and those are the household items everybody buy, right? Every U.S. citizen buy, every American buys because everyone needs TV at home, everyone needs toothpaste at home, everyone needs towel, toothbrush, microwave, everything, right? So household items is something that everyone buys. So if China has growth in those areas, they're exporting household items, and if they have growth in the household items production, so China is making every television cheaper. I don't know if you remember the cost of a TV, right? The cost of TV becomes super cheap. 1,000, 2,000 yuan will buy you a very huge TV, a flat screen TV. TV was very expensive in the past, but now it's super cheap. So if China has expansions in TV manufacturing and making TV very cheap, and the Americans are importing TVs, and that will make them happy because they spend less and less money on TV, right? TV becomes cheaper for them. Toothpaste becomes cheaper for them. A cup becomes cheaper for them, right? Pen and pencil become cheaper for them. Everything else, everyday items become cheaper for them. It will bring down the cost of living for the average American citizen. So this is what I mean, right? So if there's a growth in the area for the product where you import, you will be happy. And if there's a growth in the area where you export, so you will find more competition, right? You will find more competition. You will receive less money from whatever you sell. So it's not good. Okay. So using this idea, when you think about this in terms of this idea, when there's this growth of Chinese manufacturing in household items, who will be benefiting and who will be suffering? Just think about that, right? So US and European Union, Japan, South Korea, they will be benefiting because they don't make these kind of things. US they don't make TVs, and Japan don't make TV anymore. European Union, European countries, they don't really produce TV anymore. So if China can bring down the cost of TV, they will be happy. However, not everyone's happy though. So imagine, suppose Vietnam is making TV. Vietnam is producing LED TV. And if there's expansion from China on TV productions, then Vietnam will be competing with China for TV, right, in the international market. So if there's more competition, the price will be lower, then Vietnam will receive less money, right, for the TV they export. So it will be bad for Vietnam's terms of trade, but it will be good for US, Japan, European countries, their terms of trade. Okay, make sense? Let's move on. Any questions? All right. So this diagram gives us the data to show that over the last few decades, as we see China, South Korea, and to some extent Malaysia, Vietnam, many economies have been catching up, right, in productions. And then you will see the terms of trade, how does it change for themselves and to the rest of the world. And here we have the example that we are looking at China's terms of trade over the last few decades. It's actually decreasing, deteriorating. The terms of trade for China is actually lower, but for the US, it's more or less stable, around 100 level. So around this level. So not much difference, not much changes to U.S. terms of trade. So from this data, what we can see, this data is on the World Bank, what we can see is that when the advanced nations welcoming the newly industrialized countries or economies to enter or integrate into the world trade, it does not really uh, decrease the welfare of the advanced nation, because we can see that this newly industrial countries is not competing. They are not competing with the advanced nations in terms of their exports. Okay, so there's not much change in terms of trade for US. For China, this is lowering, and I guess we will have the reason why this is the case. We will discuss this a little bit. Okay, discuss this a little bit in our later examples. Why this is deteriorating in terms of trade for China. All right. Okay, so we are going to talk about import tariff and export subsidies. And through these two terms, we will see why this can be potentially the case. Why these two trade instrument is the potential case for and the other one is the export subsidies. So I guess more or less you guys know what is import tariff. It's basically a tax on importing goods, and you can import goods from overseas, and then you put a tariff on it, and that will become import tariff. So import tariff are tax levy on imports, and export subsidies are payments given to domestic producers that exports. So it can be in many different forms or formats. So it can be if you are producing, um, if you are a producer of clothes, and if you receive subsidies from the government can come to you and tell you that, you know what, you can take this piece of land for free. I will let you to produce your clothes. So they can give you free lands for your factory, or they can charge you very little rent for the land. This is kind of subsidies too. Or another way it can be they will tax you less. That can be also considered as subsidies. Or they can just give you direct transfer as well. So if you're selling clothes to US, and for every piece of clothes you are selling, the government come to you and tell you that I will give you $2 for every clothes you sell to US. So this is also a sort of subsidies. Okay, and both of these policies will change the terms of trade and therefore national welfare. And we are going to look at how. Okay, import tariff and export subsidies drive the wedge between the price in the world market and the price in the domestic market. How does it work? So if banana is $1 per kilogram, $1 per kg in the world market, but when it comes to China, if the Chinese government put 20% tariff on banana imports, so what happens is that for every kilogram of banana, it enters China, you have to pay 20 cents because it's $1, right? A kilogram. So the importer must be paying 20 cents for the tariff. And after it enters the door of China, the banana price will become $1.20. $1 is for the international price, and 20 cents is the cost for the tariff, right? So the total cost of the banana when it enters China, it becomes $1.20. Okay? So there's a difference between the world market price and the Chinese domestic market price for banana. One is $1, the other one is $1.20. All right, so this is how you put a badge, like some badge that differentiate the price for different markets. And now let's look at what does import tariff do to a country and what does export subsidies do to a country. Switch that. If home country import tariff imposes tariff on fruit imports, the price of banana relative to the price of clothes rises for domestic consumer. Right? If the banana is $1 per kilogram in the world market, but if the government put 20% tariff on banana imports, so the banana in Chinese market will become $1.20. And the price for banana will become relatively expensive compared to before, right? Compared to before. Because there are two goods, clothes and banana in the country. And for the fixed price of clothes, the clothes price does not change. And now the banana price becomes more expensive due to the import tariff. Okay, so the relative price of clothes will become less. All right, think about in a ratio, right? Think about in ratio. The price ratio is the price of clothes over the price of banana. When the banana price increases, so the price ratio of clothes over the price of food will become lower. And that's why this is saying, right? This is saying the price of clothes relative to the price of food falls for domestic producer. So what happens? What happens? Many people see that, well, banana become more attractive because it used to be $1 before the tariff, now it become $1.20. It become better to be a farmer. Okay? So some of these manufacturing workers at home will start moving to become a farmer because growing banana become more attractive. The price of banana become more expensive. They can sell banana, make more money. But not all. We discussed this before, right? You will not see everyone from the clothes factory all migrate to become a farmer. That will not happen because the more worker moving from one sector to the other, the cost will become higher, right? So they always balance out the cost and benefit. So they will only only a proportion of workers that will move from clothes manufacturing to food manufacturing, food growing. Okay, so what happens is that since there will be more farmers in the country, right? The output of banana will become higher, right? The supply of banana will become higher. So this is what it says, right? Domestic producers will receive lower relative price of clothes and therefore will become more willing to switch to food production. And the relative supply of clothes will decrease because there will be more banana and less clothes. And therefore, the relative supply of clothes will decrease. Okay? And that's actually good for the home country. And we do not know. And it depends on what? It depends on the size of the country here. The magnitude of these effects depends on the size of the home country relative to the rest of the world. Why do I say that? Now, let's put that into the perspective of two different sized countries. One is US, one is Singapore. Singapore is a tiny country, right, with about 4 million people. So, if Singapore imports banana and Singapore put a tariff on banana, okay, they put a tariff on banana. What happened to the banana price to the world? Nothing, right? Imagine the world has millions of billions of banana every year. Singapore only consumes tiny little bananas. So if Singapore impose tariff on banana, maybe there's a 10% decrease in the consumption of banana. So the world demand for banana, um, it's a bit less, but not much, right? Basically, there's not much impact on the world. Okay, so because the population in Singapore is not many, and and I wouldn't say that, but basically it's that the rest of the world do not care whether Singapore demand more or less banana. It does not matter because it's such a tiny demand there. It's not big in terms of the world's consumption. Okay, so if Singapore demand less banana, there will be little or no impact on the price of banana in the world. Okay, so that will only hurt their people because the Singaporean has to pay more money for the same banana due to the higher tariff, right? But it does not help Singaporean to improve their terms of trade because the world market for banana does not change in price. Now, this is the story, right? We have completed the story for small country. But for big country like China, for example, 1.3 billion people, all right? And China represents about, let's say, 40% of the world's consumption of banana, all right? If China import banana, and China represents 40% of the consumption of banana in the world, and then if China impose tariff on banana, so banana people there will be less people buying banana because banana become more expensive in China. In China, less demand for banana. So think about the output of banana, right, from the world, and then the Chinese people demand less banana, and China represents a huge proportion of banana consumption. So what do the world do? Nothing, right? They cannot do anything. So suddenly, the price of banana will become lower because there's less demand, right? If China is an importer for banana, and if the world doesn't sell banana, they have to reduce the price to sell, right? It's like if you're a business person and then you have a lot of banana, you are selling banana, and one of your big clients stop buying from you, and what do you do, right? You have tons of banana. What do you do with the banana? They're gonna die if you don't do anything, right? So you want to clear the inventory, you want to clear the stock, so you reduce the price. If you reduce the price of banana, who's gonna be happy? Then the importer of banana will be happy. If China import banana, then the world price of banana will drop, right? And then we don't think about the government tariff on banana or anything else yet, but the tariff that China imposed on banana will lower the international price for banana. And China import banana, right? So for them, it will be happy because whatever they sell, Huawei phone, Xiaomi phone, same price. But when they pay for the bananas, they pay less. It's cheaper from the world, and they will be happy. There will be improvement in the terms of trade for China. Now, when we try to wrap this up, you see that a large country can improve their welfare by using tariff, using tax, using tariff to change the terms of trade for them. However, for the small country, they don't have the power to do that. Like think about Singapore, right? No matter what they do, because it's tiny population, whatever they do, it doesn't really impact on the world. So their tariff will not do anything to the terms of trade, unlike China or United States. So this is the reason when you look at the world, like especially for large countries like US, European Unions, and China, they tend to use tariff as an instrument to manipulate their terms of trade, therefore their welfare. Okay, so this is the reason why US trying to use tariff to fight China, right? And China also want to use tariff to fight US, and because they know that they have the market size, they know that they have the market power to change the international price and change the terms of trade. But you don't really see Singapore or Sweden or Switzerland, they come out and say they will use tariffs to do anything, because they know that whatever they do, it doesn't really impact the world price. Okay, now the example here is the effect of food tariff on terms of trade. So an import tariff on food imposed by home both reduce the relative supply of clothes and increase the relative demand for the world as a whole. As a result, so the relative price of clothes must rise from 0.1 to 0.2. Okay, so it's good for the exporter for home, right? Home country export clothes. So there goes improvement in terms of trade, because that will result in a higher relative price for clothes. Home country is happy. They export something becoming more expensive. Now let's take a look at the impact of export subsidies. Subsidy is not it's not good for terms of trade, by the way. So let's take it as let's take the setting through this example. If a home country imposes a subsidies on clothes export, the price of clothes relative to the price of food rises for domestic consumer. So why is it so? So why your home government give subsidies to exporter, and the exporter will charge more for the home market? Let's talk about this. So if you are an exporter for clothes, you are making clothes in China, and you sell clothes to the rest of the world, all right? And one day, the government come to you and tell you that for every single piece of clothes you sell to the world market, I will give you $2 subsidies, okay? So you will be looking at the price. You will be looking at, okay, I can make $10 a piece of clothes from the world market. When I sell the clothes to the US, I can make $10 a piece of clothes. And the government will also pay me $2 for every piece of clothes I sell. So I'm making $12 a piece of clothes now because of the subsidy. Instead of $10, now I'm getting $12. This $2 extra is coming from government. Okay? And you will be asking the question, why do I sell to domestic market if the price of clothes is $10 globally, right? The world market is $10, and I can sell to domestic market for $10. I will sell to the world market for $10. This is my price. This is the international price. Okay, but now when I sell to the world, I will get extra $2 from the government. So I'm making $12 now when I sell to the world. And when I look at the domestic market, I can only get $10 from a domestic consumer. Well, I will not sell to them because I don't make as much money as I sell to the world, right? So I will not sell to Chinese consumers because I make less money. But I will do that only if the Chinese consumer will pay me equal, right? Whatever I can receive from the world, the Chinese consumer will pay me the same price. Then I will supply to the domestic market. Okay, so the Chinese consumer have to pay me $12 for a piece of clothes in order to convince me to supply to the domestic market. If they cannot pay me $12, I will forget about domestic market. I will sell everything to the world market. Right? This is how subsidies will increase the domestic price. So domestic consumer must pay a higher relative price of clothes to producer, and therefore they will be more willing to switch to food consumptions, and relative demand for clothes will decrease. Okay, so domestic producers receive higher relative price of clothes when they export, and therefore they will be more willing to switch to clothes production. Relative supply of clothes will increase. Now the problem is this: when when the government subsidize clothes productions, everyone knows that, well, for every piece of clothes I sell to the world, I get $2. The farmer also sees that. The farmer is not stupid. They will see that, and they'll be looking at, why do I grow banana now? If I change my job, I'll make clothes. I'll sell to the world. I will make extra $2, right? The price become better. So why do I grow banana now? I will just change my job to work in the factory. So there will be, because some people will think that way, and there will be more production in clothes thereafter, right? After that, there will be more clothes, more supply of clothes. When there are more supply of clothes, the price of clothes will drop in the international market, and the terms of trade for the home country will decrease, because the home country is an exporter for clothes, and the clothes price drops, it's gonna be it's gonna be bad for the terms of trade, right? There will be a decrease in terms of trade for the home country, and this is reason subsidies will decrease the terms of trade for home country, and this is probably the reason why um, there's an export subsidies. The terms of trade decreases for home, and the welfare of the country decreases to the benefit of the foreign country. So it will make the foreign country happier, but it makes the domestic consumer less happy. Domestic consumer has to pay higher price. Okay. Now, graphically, this is how we show the effects of clothes subsidies on terms of trade. So when export subsidies on clothes has the opposite effect on relative supply and demand than a tariff on food, the relative supply of clothes for the world rises because more farmers are changing jobs, they want to work in factory, they receive more money, so the relative supply of clothes will shift to the rights, okay? Shift to the rights. And while the relative demand for the world falls, and home terms of trade decline because the home relative demand is also dropping, so you will have a less shift. And then you will see there's a change in the relative price of uh, close to food, dropping from 0.1 to 0.2. So the relative price for home country become lower, for the world become lower, and it's not going to be good for the exporter of clothes. Okay, the exporter clothes will not want to see there's a price drop in clothes, but this is what's happening. All right, implications of terms of trade effects, and who gains and who loses. All right. Standard trade model predicts that an import tariff by home country can increase domestic welfare at the expense of foreign country. An export subsidy by home country reduces domestic welfare to the benefit of foreign country. And this is only true for large countries. And all our examples here and our setup is for the case where home country is a big country, it's a large country. And this is not true for small countries. Small countries always better to have no tariff, nothing, right? So additional effects of tariff and subsidies that can occur in the world with many countries and many goods, a foreign country may subsidize the export of goods that the US also exports, and which will reduce the price for the US in the world market and decrease the terms of trade. For example, the European Union subsidized agricultural exports, which reduce the price of the American farmer. They receiving from their goods in the world market. A foreign country may put tariff on imported goods that the US also imports, which will reduce the price for the US in the world market and increase the total trade. Okay. And so the export subsidies by foreign country on goods that, so this is kind of the slides that summarize the impact of subsidies, okay? So if the export subsidies by a foreign country on goods that the US import, that will reduce the world price for US imports and increase the terms of trade for US, right? So we will put this in our own simple words. If China imports banana, so banana is the agricultural goods that China import, and if Philippines subsidize for banana, okay, then they will make, because Philippines subsidize banana, it will encourage more Filipino workers to work in a banana growing business, and there will be more banana supply to the world, and that will drop the price of banana to be lower. All right, and who's gonna be happy? Then China will be happy because the price of banana will become cheaper, and China import banana, right? The cheaper the price is banana, the happier they are because they can buy more banana using the same amount of money. Okay, so whatever you import, if the foreign country subsidize on those goods, then you will be happy. But you will not be happy if you are also an exporter of banana. And imagine if China also export banana, if China also grow banana, right? Then suddenly you see the Philippine government subsidize on banana, and you will see that there will be more banana coming out from Filipino market, right, from Philippines. Then the price of banana will become lower in the international market. So that will be bad for China too if China also produce banana. So this is what it says here. The US, so export subsidies by foreign country on goods that the US also exports will reduce the price, the world price for US exports, and decrease the total trade for US. Same idea for the banana example for China, right? All right. What about import tariff? So import tariff by a foreign country on goods that the US exports will reduce the price, the world price for US exports, and decrease the terms of trade for US. If the import tariff by a foreign country is on goods that the US also imports, that will reduce the world price for US imports and increase the terms of trade for US. Okay, so foreign policies is important. So when you have a trading partner, when you look at their trade policies, and their trade policies will also impact on your terms of trade and your welfare too. So let me put that into a stories of what's going on in the world. Like for example, if US impose tariff on Chinese, for example, on Chinese television, okay, on Chinese made television, And then the world price for the television will be cheaper, will be lower, because there's less demand for television, right? US imposed a tariff, making the domestic price of television in US higher, so less demand from US consumers on TVs. So there are so much inventories of Chinese TVs, and what do? They have to lower the price for sales. When they lower the price for sale, it will be good not only for US consumers, but also for the European consumers too, because European consumers also import TV from China. When the Chinese TV becomes cheaper, they will be happy too. So this is how a foreign nation's trade policy will also have impact on the terms of trade, even though you are not doing anything, right? If you are a country in the European Union, you don't do anything, but you are watching U.S. imposing tariff on Chinese TV, then you know that the TV of the Chinese-made TV will become cheaper, and you will be benefit from that too, because you are buying cheaper TV from China. Okay, so this is the summary of what the impact of import tariff and export subsidies will do to terms of trade, and also to the welfare, right? The impact of welfare associated with terms of trade. Finally, summarizing this, export subsidies on a good decreases the relative world price of that good by increasing the relative supply of that good and decreasing the relative demand of that good. The opposite is true for import tariff. Right? It does the opposite. Okay, so I think we are done on the import tariff and export subsidies.